Joining me now is retired US Navy Captain James Fanell, former Director of Intelligence for the US Pacific Fleet Command. Thanks for joining us, Jim. Good to talk to you again. Last time we spoke, you were arguing that Australia ought to ditch the French submarine deal and go for the conventional Japanese option because that would be better for Pacific security. Do you think it's the right deal to ditch the French subs and go nuclear?
Well, good evening, Chris, and thanks for the invitation. I think this is, as you said, an historic event, and I think it's the right move for Australia. I still think that in the interim, maybe there's an option to somehow utilize Japanese capability, and that it'll probably take a decade for you to fully get nuclear boats. So there may be some kind of interim operability with the Japanese. But the idea that you're moving towards a capability that will put you on par with the U.S. Navy and the Royal Navy in terms of nuclear technology and nuclear-powered submarines is a really good step forward, and it will bring you into the ability to provide a strategic deterrence to Beijing's aggressive actions.
The benefits for Australia are very strong, obviously. Enhance our defence capabilities. What do the US and the UK get out of it?
Well, I think what they get is we have a capability that we can count on each other to be able to come to the fight at a speed that you normally couldn't get with a conventional platform. Nuclear submarines can transit submerged at greater than 20 knots. And so from a place like Perth, you could get to Singapore within 2 or 3 or 4 days, much faster than with a conventional power. And that would put you with the capability of these new anti-ship cruise missile Tomahawks. You could have a shooter in the southern portion of the South China Sea, able to put PLA Navy combatants at risk all the way up to Hainan Island from the southern South China Sea. So this enables the United States to be able to have a partner that they can rely on to either offset U.S. Navy submarine force operations or to contribute. And so I think that's where the benefit comes to all of us.
There's been much talk in the past about the so-called pivot to Asia. A lot of people disappointed it hasn't been as obvious. This would seem to be obviously a pivot to this part of the world by the US because there's only one other country you've shared this technology with before, and that, of course, is the UK.
Right. This is a major demonstration of a commitment beyond just a PowerPoint bumper sticker, as the pivot in many ways was. So this is something that I think people will be able to, in Australia, the United States, and UK, to be able to tangibly measure whether or not progress is being made. With the experience of the French deal, I think there's going to be a lot of pressure now on all concerned to not have another episode like that.
Now, how will China respond? They'll see this as very much directed at them. That's obviously the case. But how do you expect them to respond physically as well as rhetorically?
I expect them to continue on the trajectory that they've been on for the last 2 decades. I mean, just this last 2 weeks, we've seen Chinese surface action groups transiting out through the first island chain, back through Yonaguni near Taiwan. There's simultaneously bomber forces penetrating the Taiwan Southern Air Defense Identification Zone. You've had, in the last month and a half, reports about new nuclear ICBM silos out in central China, 350 of them, concurrent with Chinese officials talking about maybe we need to nuke Japan and showing videos of sending nuclear missiles into Japan. So China's been threatening the region. There's no question about that. Your former prime minister said that China's a land power. Well, he may need to go back and do some more research because China has become a major naval power, and that trajectory, it doesn't look like it's going to decline. It's continuing to grow. So what you will see is increased rhetoric. They will use this announcement as a chance to beat up all 3 nations and say that they are the aggressors. But the reality is China has been the aggressor in the maritime domain over the last 20 years, and it's growing every day.
The former Prime Minister you mentioned to, just very briefly and finally, was former Labor Prime Minister Paul Keating. He says this deal will ensure that we're locked into the American side of any conflict with China. But surely that's been a reality since the ANZUS Treaty was signed. So there's no circumstance in which there could be conflict between the US and China, and Australia would be standing back as a neutral observer.
I think that's correct. And also, to counter what he said, if it's true that we're locked into a U.S. position and that's bad, then what does he offer? To be locked into a PRC-dominated world? I don't understand that.
Agreed. Thanks for joining us, Jim. I appreciate it.
Thank you.